announcement has been paid for by the new Howell order.
Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, we'll cover it all here on Commanders Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So I thought today was very fitting to take a trip around my timeline. Spin the block once or twice, see what is out there during this news cycle that pertains to the Commanders in some way, shape, or form. A couple of things caught my eye, wanted to share them with you. So let's take a look as we go around my timeline. So I wanted to take a look at a couple of items in particular, a lot of it centering around head coach or offensive coordinator Ben Johnson of the Detroit Lions. He's going to be a hot commodity this offseason, probably going to be the most sought after offensive coordinator that is going to be available to become a head coach this offseason. He was highly sought after last year. He turned down interviews, went back to Detroit. I don't blame him. There weren't a lot of good opportunities available last year. And so this year, much better options are going to be afforded to him. I think his stock is as good as it's going to get. I don't think it's going to get any higher than it is right now. And so with the Lions playing the kind of football that they've played this season, they're going to make the playoffs, more likely than not win the NFC North. Let's see what happens when they get to the postseason. That can only bolster his stock and give him even more leverage in terms of a bargaining chip. Now, with that said, I want to first take a look at the tweet from NFL Rumors and talk about this for a second. And then I'm going to connect it to the next tweet. Now, I want you to keep something in mind. Josina Anderson is down bad right now. Ever since she left ESPN, her reports have been sketchy at best, and I'm putting it mildly and I'm being nice, okay? For lack of a better phrase, I don't trust Josina Anderson right now, okay? She used to be really plugged into the players, and when she would say something, it was worth listening to. Of late, she's been way off base and generally inaccurate, okay? She was the one that reported Washington was interested in running back Kareem Hunt. And I told you guys, nah, that's not what I'm hearing, okay? Don't think he's going to be coming here, right? Nothing ever came of that. He never was on for a visit or anything, right? And he ended up signing back with the Cleveland Browns maybe 2-3 weeks later down the road. And so, or maybe after the Chubb injury. I don't even know if he had a team until the Chubb injury and then they brought him back. Whatever the case may be. Just take anything Josina Anderson says with a grain of salt. For me, it's not a grain of salt. It's more like the entire container of Morton's. That said, I want to focus on the first tweet, though, from NFL Rumors, which says Detroit Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is the favorite head coaching candidate for Carolina Panthers owner David Tepper. Now, this I believe, right? Because he can want Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson does not have to want him or his organization. And if you listen to Rick Spielman, which we're going to get into a little bit later on, and what he's talked about on John Keim's podcast, and I think it's a great listen, and if you haven't had a chance, I think you should do yourself a favor. It's roughly 20 minutes. Give yourself 20 minutes of, give John Keim, 20 minutes of your time and listen to what Rick Spielman had to say. Again, he's a former GM for a reason. Things did not work out. And again, we all have our philosophical beliefs. Rick Spielman, I can tell you how he ran the Minnesota Vikings and what his philosophical beliefs are. And he kind of led you in that direction. And I can give you that. And I've talked about Rick Spielman in the past. I'm very familiar with his work, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is, Tepper is desperate, and this is so looking at this situation, a lot of people like to connect the dots. Ben Johnson's from Carolina. Bryce Young is there now. Bryce Young was going to be there last year, or whomever Ben Johnson wanted last year was going to be there. And so he could have taken, and this is why I don't necessarily believe Ben Johnson. He may be the favorite of David Tepper. I don't know if that team is at the top of his list, because he had a chance to go to Carolina last year. What's different this year than last year? You would think that last year, this team was on the fringe of making the playoffs. This team, I'm talking about Carolina, was on the fringe of making the playoffs last year. They just missed it by a game, okay? They were on an upward trajectory. The defense was really good. You felt like you had some pieces to work with. You still had DJ Moore at that time. And so that was a more enticing job last year to me than it is right now. They're down bad. Bryce Young has not played well. And, other than money, what is it that attracts a guy like Ben Johnson to a place like Carolina, where the owner has been impulsive? He's fired 2 coaches 2 years in a row, early before the season has ended. What makes a coach like Ben Johnson say, I want to leave Detroit where I'm comfortable, when I got all these other opportunities, all these teams are very interested. What's going to make me leave Detroit to come to Carolina? It doesn't make any sense, right? And again, this opportunity existed for him last year. If he really wanted to go to Carolina, he could have just went last year, right? So I just don't buy Carolina as a destination for Ben Johnson. That said, let's go to the next tweet, because this is where things get interesting. Now, Josina Anderson, again, take what Josina Anderson says. I don't believe this tweet, by the way, just so we're clear. However, I do want to connect it to that tweet that I just read to make it all kind of come together. If there is any validity to this, I don't think there is, okay, personally. Okay, but you can believe what you want to believe. All right, so Josina Anderson tweeted out the following. I'm told personnel around the league are discussing their awareness that some owners have been told Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, his asking price is at least or around $15 million a year for a head coaching job per source. That's outrageous, okay? We were all blown away when David Tepper paid an unknown NFL commodity in Matt Rule $8 million per year. That was insane for a guy who had never won anything in the NFL. Great college career, had turned programs around, but to go and give a college coach that kind of bread with no NFL chops, and again, he had been in the league as an assistant, never as a head coach, hadn't won anything of note in the NFL, hadn't been an NFL head coach before. To give that kind of bread to a first-time NFL head coach was insane. Josina Anderson then continues, now my question is, if you're a head coach candidate with Super Bowl championships, Super Bowl and playoff experience like Darrell Bevell, Eric Bieniemy, Dan Quinn, Olu Amaruno, what should their asking price be this upcoming coaching carousel season? So that's the gist of Josina Anderson. Again, store that away. Do whatever you would like to do with that information. Again, I think all of this is erroneous from her. I think she's trying to garner attention because I don't think any coach in his right mind who has no NFL experience as a head coach is going to come out of the gate demanding $15 million per year. Now, if Ben Johnson's agent threw that out there, right? If the Detroit Lions threw that out there because they want teams to back off and be scared away, interesting, right? That would be interesting. But if I'm Ben Johnson's agent, you could throw that number out there, because there's only one owner dumb enough to pay you that kind of money, and I'll throw dumb and desperate enough to pay you that kind of money, and that's David Tepper. And Tepper would cough up maybe 15 per. Like he's that impulsive. Again, that's the kind of guy you don't want to work for, though, right? But that's a lot of money. If Tepper came at you with a 4-year, $60 million deal, which would be the richest contract in NFL history for a head coach, is Ben Johnson going to turn that down? I don't know if you're at liberty to turn that down, even though you may not believe in the organization, the quarterback that you may be coaching, and the organization as a whole, and the roster and everything that goes with it. This could be a kamikaze mission, but you'll take a 4-year, $60 million kamikaze mission, because you may not make $60 million in your entire coaching career combined. So it's hard to turn that kind of money down. However, there's something else to be said about your name and your brand and what you're capable of. And if you go in there and you flame out and it's a disaster, you get your 60 mil, because once you sign, unlike players, once a coach signs, he's guaranteed all of his money. And it's a disaster, maybe other teams say, hey, we know what the situation was. Sort of like how teams used to treat coaches that came to Washington. Hey, we understand. We know what it was like. We know what you dealt with. We're not going to hold that against you. But generally speaking, A disaster is a disaster. A dumpster fire is a dumpster fire. If it's bad, it's going to reflect bad on you, right? And whether we can try to separate you from the situation that you were in, it's still bad. It's all bad, all right? Again, when you go into a reverse car wash, you go in clean, you come out dirty. That's what Carolina is right now. It's a reverse car wash. You don't want to go into that situation, even though $60 million is a lot of money, right? And again, this is all hypothetically speaking because, again, I don't believe this report from Josina Anderson. However, if his agent put it out there, it makes sense that Carolina would be a target destination because that's the only team that would be desperate enough, dumb enough to spend that kind of money on a head coach. No other team in the league is going to do that. You're not going to set precedents like that to sign a head coach. This is the reason why NFL teams and the Player Association in particular made sure that they set a rookie wage scale. Why? Because rookies were coming into the league who hadn't done a damn thing and were getting paid millions upon millions of dollars more than veterans who had already made a name for themselves, established themselves as good football players. Rookies were coming in day one making 10 times more than guys that had already played 5-6 years in the league and were Pro Bowl, all-pro players. And that shit was crazy. Guys like Sam Bradford comes into the league and he's already making, on a contract worth $60 million. And there are guys that have been in the league 8 years, 3-time All-Pros, 4-time Pro Bowler, and this guy hasn't accumulated, $20 million in his career. And this guy's making 60 and he hasn't done anything in the league. So they had to make the rookie wage scale. Like, the NFL's done a really good job of making sure that they cap how much coaches make. You're not going to pay a guy out of the gate who hasn't proven himself. Like, if this is Bill Belichick and he's demanding that kind of money, if it's like Bill Cowher, if he came back, or somebody that has experience, that's won a Super Bowl, that's done all you can do in this league and has the chops. That's like if Mike Tomlin got fired from Pittsburgh and then he, became a hot commodity on the market and he demanded, $8-9 million and he said, hey, this is my asking price, somebody would pay that because the guy has chops in this league that states he should be paid X amount of dollars per year. Ben Johnson doesn't have that. He just has a reputation that he's built as a play caller. But how many play callers have we seen be dynamic and then have it not work out for them as a head coach? We don't know if he's a leader of men. We just know he's a dynamic play caller. Adam Gase was a dynamic play caller. Adam Gase was a terrible head coach, right? So we don't know how this is going to work. We just know that Ben Johnson is going to be highly sought after because of his work in Detroit, helping turn that franchise around. That said, I don't believe this report to be accurate, but if there is a team out there, and that's why I connect the two, if there's a team out there that would be willing potentially to pay him, anything even remotely close to that, it'd be Carolina. It'd be David Tepper. Now, if you're Ben Johnson, then if Carolina gets reckless with the contract that they offer you, you got to take a second to consider it. Because right now, if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm staying as far away from Carolina as I could possibly stay away, right? However, that money talks, everything else walks, right? Because you start looking at that situation, and you look at the money that they're offering, and then you look at the place that you want to go, and you see what they're offering, and you compare the two. And look, if you're a really good coach, and let's say Washington is offering you half of what the Lions are offering, or the Panthers are offering. Let's say Washington's offering you a 5-year, and let's say that Ben Johnson is being offered a 5-year, $60 million deal, which is 12. 15 is ridiculous. 12 is ridiculous too, but it's more plausible than 15. 12 is still ridiculous, okay? Let's say it's 5 years, $60 million. And let's say Washington's deal is 5 years, $30 million or $35 million, right? All right. That's half, almost half, right? If it's 30, it's half. If it's 35, it's a little less than half, right, of what Carolina is offering you. Do you take that job knowing that if you're successful, because Washington has the resources, they've got a patient owner, everything is on the up and up in Washington, and you feel like you could be highly successful there? And just know that you'll make that money times whatever if you're really good at your job, right? You'll get that opportunity to get another contract and the next contract that you negotiate will be higher than the one you got when you first came in, and so forth and so forth. You can make that money back. But if you go to Carolina and suck and stink it up and you become tarnished and you got to go back to being an offensive coordinator and maybe you get another chance down the road, it could be sort of a canceling out of how much money you just made. I said all of that to say this. I don't believe that Ben Johnson is really interested in Carolina. Carolina is interested in Ben Johnson. Who isn't? What team that has an opening isn't interested in Ben Johnson? The question is Ben Johnson interested in Carolina? I think the answer is no, because again, I just harken back to last offseason. That opportunity existed. Carolina was there, and he turned that opportunity down and went back to Detroit. Among the jobs that were available last year, he just looked at the slate and said, nah, I'm good. I'll just go back. I want to finish. How many offensive coordinators say, I want to finish what I started? No. If there's a job there that I want, I'm going to take that opportunity. He didn't even interview for a lot of these jobs because there was nothing there, right? Carolina was a part of that. So I don't think anything has changed. If anything, they've gotten worse. And Tepper's gotten more desperate. And it looks even worse than it did last year when he fired Matt Rule. At least when he fired Matt Rule, Rule had already been there 3+ years. And you could say, okay, it hasn't worked. He fired Frank Reich, 11 games into the season. There's no way as a head coach, I look at the impulsive nature of David Tepper and say, I want to work for that guy. No matter how much money he's throwing at me. Again, you got to consider it if it's a lot of money, but I digress. Again, take Josina Anderson's tweets with a grain of salt. I've already seen tweets that have already dispelled this notion. Again, believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T on social media. Unless it's coming from the Schefters and the Rappaports, guys with ironclad reputations, unless it's coming from one of those insiders, believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. Right. So, anyway, thought that was interesting on the timeline today. I still think Ben Johnson is the front runner here in Washington to be the next head coach of the Washington Commanders, and I think that's going to happen. All right, I looked into the crystal ball last night. Told you already what was going to happen. Last thing I want to bring up that came across my timeline, John Keim released a new podcast talking about the state of the Commanders with a former GM, Rick Spielman, was the former GM of both the Dolphins and the Vikings, but most notably the Vikings. I think is where he did his best work and almost got them to a Super Bowl. His way of roster building, his style of GMing is to build through the draft. He was never a big free agency guy. He would, again, and that's how it should be, though. You should build your roster through the draft, supplement your roster through free agency and trades, and that's how you should build your roster. It keeps the cost down, right? You're not paying a bunch of money to guys that either are, towards the back end of their contract or careers, rather, and you're not paying big money to guys, a bunch of guys on the roster, and kind of restricting what movements you can make moving forward. When you keep the cost down by, investing in a ton of rookies or guys on a rookie contract, you keep the cost low. And so the more draft picks, he was always a guy that wanted, 10, 11, 12, 13 draft picks. The more darts you throw at the dartboard, the more opportunities you have to succeed. That was always his model in Minnesota. So he talked about that, but he said the number one thing for a GM, if you're going to take a job that you focus in on, is the ownership group, the owner in particular. Is this a guy that is patient? That's why Josh Harris not firing Ron Rivera, not making any rash decisions, unlike David Tepper, who has been impulsive and making decisions flying off the handle like a fan. A lot of you have been screaming for Ron to be fired, this, that, and the third, and Josh Harris is taking a patient approach. This is beneficial when you start to look for a new GM. They look at his patience, they look at how he's allowed everything to play itself out, and they say, hey, that's a guy I don't mind working for, right? And that's been the message. Like, I'm not going to be impulsive. I'm not going to do anything rash. I'm going to let this thing play out, and then we're going to make informed decisions at season's end. We already know what's going to happen. They're going to clean house for the most part. But listening to Rick Spielman, he talked about what a prospective GM looks for in his next destination. And that's one of the biggest things. He talked about the quarterback position and what the decision would, be, and what all entities would factor into making the decision on whether you keep Sam Howell as the starter next year and draft other positions, or if you go get the quarterback and continue to try to build. But, and again, a lot of this hinges upon how this next GM views this roster, views the team. Like Rick Spielman pretty much said, hey, Terry McLaurin is nice, but he ain't no number one true dog like Justin Jefferson. And again, there aren't a bunch of those dudes, right? He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not Jamar Chase. He's not Stephon Diggs. He's not one of these A++ elite dudes where you can bypass a Marvin Harrison Jr. because you already got one of those dudes, right? And he cited the Seattle Seahawks, and he said, hey, they went out and got Jack. They already had Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and they went out and got Jackson Smith and Jigba, and look what it's done to their offense. Look at the play that Jackson Smith and Jigba made. And, my argument, my counter to that would be, well, we got 3 dudes already. They didn't have 3. They had 2, and Jackson Smith and Jigba made it 3. My counter to that is Jahan Dotson can be Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yes, Terry's not as big as DK Metcalf, but he's produced like DK Metcalf. Not the touchdowns, obviously. DK is in a much different stratosphere when it comes to touchdowns. But the yardage, the catches, the production, things of that nature, Terry's right on par with DK Metcalf, right? Where there's a significant drop-off is Tyler Lockett. There is no other guy on our team that has the numbers and has put in the work like Tyler Lockett. But we like what Curtis Samuel has done for us. But bottom line is, could we use another receiver? Sure. Could we use a tight end? Absolutely. Could we use a tackle? It's a must. We can't use a tackle. We need a tackle. But do we need a quarterback? And right now, the answer seems to be yes, right? Looking at the situation, you can't pass up a quarterback if you feel really good about the quarterback position. And I got a conversation that I heard someone having today on my timeline, and I would bring it up today, but I don't want to overwhelm you, overload you. We got plenty of time to talk about all this stuff, so I'll save that probably for tomorrow's show. But it is a conversation that I think is worth having about the prospective quarterbacks coming up in the next draft, and we can have a conversation. And it kind of ties into the quarterback that's currently in Washington right now, so that's something to take into consideration as well. But again, that's a great listen if you want to get into the mind of a former NFL GM and kind of see how they think. Again, not all GMs think the same. Not all GMs have the same philosophical approach. His is building through the draft, using free agency. And he also said, and this is something that I've told you already, and I firmly believe that this is going to be the case. He's like, I don't believe in spending big in free agency when you first come on board somewhere as a new general manager. And so I don't think we're going to see the next GM, and I told you this already, come in here and spend big at 1 or 2 positions. Like a lot of fans are saying, oh, we got to go out and get a Brian Burns. We got to go out and get this guy or that guy and spend all this money on one particular player. I don't see the next general manager coming in here and doing that. I see him spreading the wealth, bringing in 10, 11 new guys, right? At reasonable deals. Some of the guys that are free agents for Washington, we talked about this last night, 21 pending free agents for Washington in the upcoming offseason. If these guys are willing to take reasonable deals, because some of them are like Kendall Fuller, are getting towards the back end of their careers, if they're willing to take reasonable deals within the structure of the cap, you'd love to have a Cam Curl back. You'd love to have a Kendall Fuller back. You'd love to have a Curtis Samuel back. Right? You'd love to have some of these players that have produced for us, played well back here, but the numbers have to make sense. And if you're a GM that's coming in here and you look at the landscape of this team and where we are in terms of winning and the relationship there, if you don't think you're close, a guy like Kendall Fuller may not make a ton of sense for you. That's almost 30 years old. A guy like Curtis Samuel may not make a ton of sense for you that's 27 years old, right? Signing him to another 3-year deal or so, right? It may or may not make sense for you in the grand scheme of things, where you are. A guy like Cam Curl would make tons of sense. He's only 25 years old, right? So, again, those things come into play. We'll see what they decide to do, the next group that comes in here, but also keep in mind that I don't think there's going to be this big spending spree on like 1 or 2 big priced items that get you excited, that moves the needle. I think it's going to be a lot of small little signings. This linebacker, this defensive tackle, this defensive end, this offensive guard, this running back, right? Like the Jonathan Williams and all the guys that have occupied roster spots or practice squads, but those guys are gone, right? There's no more David Mayo on this roster. That guy's gone. They're going to have to replace him with somebody, whether that's an undrafted guy, a 6th-round pick, or somebody you go out and get in free agency, okay? The days of some of these guys that have been occupying roster spots here, that's gone. Jamison Crowder's not going to be back next year, right? Byron Pringle probably not going to be back next year. Dax Milne not going to be back next year. James Smith-Williams, I think will be back. Casey Toohill won't be back next year, more likely than not. Like, a lot of these dudes that have been holding the roster, they're going to go and sign a different guy to take that defensive end spot that Casey Toohill's been holding up the last 2 or 3 years. They're going to go sign a different linebacker to fill that role that, David Mayo's been holding on to, right? There's no more Dejon Harris, right? Scooter Harris is gone. That guy's not going to exist on this roster anymore. They're going to go out and get a linebacker, whether that's via the draft or free agency. And I think you're going to see a lot of small signings to fill the voids that are going to be created by all of these guys that are no longer going to be on this roster. And so I don't think you're going to see a lot of big signings. I think you're going to see a lot of little ones, just like we saw when Ron Rivera came here in 2020. A lot of small signings, guys that didn't really move the needle for a lot of you. You were disappointed. And then, it ended up being some very fruitful signings. You just never know. But I'm telling you, when you're turning over a roster, that's how it usually goes. You're not going to spend a lot on 2 or 3 guys when you're trying to turn over a roster. You need to spend money on 9, 10, 11 different guys to bring in here on smaller deals. That's what the Texans just did, right? When they turned their roster, they did that 2 years in a row where they continue to turn that roster over, churn out the veterans, get the guys out of there that they didn't believe in, small, and it's usually 1-2 year deals. They're not signing guys to 4 or 5 year deals. You bring in a guy 1 year, $3.5 million. You bring in a guy 1 year, $5.6 million, right? And then you keep it pushing. After that 1 year, you bring in another guy to replace the guy that just signed a 1 year deal. Until you get to a place where you're comfortable, where you like the roster that you have, and now you've got the core group of guys that you've been drafting the last 2 years, and the veterans that were here prior to that, and now you've got a roster in place where then you get to a place where you got, all right, we already got 44 spots on the roster spoken for, right? That's not going to be the case this next year. It's going to be a lot of competition, a lot of roster spots available, because of the turnover of the roster. 2 years from now, I expect this roster to be more so set. And now 43 spots are spoken for. 44 roster spots are spoken for. And the back 8, 9 roster spots are up for grabs. Right? And 6 or 7 of those may be filled by draft picks. And so there's really only 3 or 4 spots available at the back end of the roster. We're not going to be there for the next year or two. So... And Spielman kind of spoke to that. But again, listen to it. 20 minutes or so of your time. Listen to it. Give it a run and see what you think. Let's go to In Other News, where we heard from Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator. I didn't watch the press conference. I'm not going to lie to you. I've kind of tuned everybody out at this point other than Sam and the players, right? I listen to the players when they speak, but any coaching, any staff members who I don't expect to be here next year, I've kind of tuned them out. There's really nothing they can say at this point. But there was a soundbite from Eric Bieniemy that I do want to share with you guys that I do think was somewhat impactful and interesting, right? To say the least. But let's get to the injury report first before we hear about what Eric Bieniemy had to say. So we took a look at this yesterday and determined that there were a number of guys on this thing. 2 in particular were just vet rest days. Kendall Fuller and Jonathan Allen. Those guys have been removed from the injury report as they should have been. But you look at this thing. I told you I don't think Charles Leno is going to play. He's out again. The one that scares me, that's not the one that scares me, because I think Cornelius Lucas can come in and do a solid job. The one that scares me is Tyler Larsen, because he's the kind of guy you need in this particular game because of his size, right? He's a bigger guy at almost 330. Nick Gates is, not the biggest guy in the world. We saw the deficiencies that he had early in the season, passing off twists and stunts, not being stout at the point of attack, being driven back into the lap of the quarterback. These were all issues. This is an aggressive defensive front with Quinnen Williams. He might get 5 sacks in this game by himself. if this offensive line isn't able to do a better job of protecting with a guy like Nick Gates in the lineup. That said, that's the one that scares me. Joshua Pryor was added to the list with an illness, didn't practice. Brian Robinson Jr., I told you guys already, I don't think he's going to play this week. I think he'll be back next week against San Francisco. Jonathan Williams, concussion, I told you, he just got in the lineup, just got an opportunity, and now he's already out of the lineup with a concussion. Everybody else I think is going to be able to play this week, including John Ridgway with a foot injury, who's been limited all week, and James Smith-Williams, who's been out with a hamstring since the Giants game, the second Giants game. I think he'll be back this week, limited all week long. I think he's going to give it a go this week. Cody Barton, knee, and Emmanuel Forbes Jr. elbow, both full participants. We expect them to be able to go. You go to the Jets side of things. It's the same three guys that didn't practice yesterday. John Franklin Myers, defensive end. Aaron Rodgers, Achilles, we know he's not going to play this season. And Zach Wilson, concussion. I already told you he's not going to play in this game. So that benefits us. That's advantage Commanders. Again, are we going to take advantage of it? We haven't taken advantage of it all season long, whether it was Justin Fields struggling or it was the Giants with Tyrod Taylor struggling, or the Giants again with Tommy DeVito struggling. We haven't taken advantage of bad quarterback play all season long. So what changes here against the Jets? Don't ask me. I don't know. All right. But anyway, Israel Abaconda and Jordan Whitehead both limited the first 2 days of practice. I think those guys are going to be able to go. And then the rest of the guys on this list are all full, which tells you they are going to be able to play on Sunday, barring any sort of setback. So let's get to Eric Bieniemy and what he had to say about Sam Howell's benching on Sunday, because it was a hot button topic after the game. I didn't think it made any sense. They're trying to spin it as, hey, this thing could be beneficial, and we'll see. Maybe Sam's taking a step back, watching, and seeing what Jacoby did and kind of assessing the situation. Maybe it does help him. I like what Sam said, so maybe that benching might do some good for him. As a wise woman once said, a change will do you good, do you good. Maybe that change will do him some good. I don't know. We'll see. A change will do you good. I don't know. Maybe the change will do him some good. We'll see. But Eric Bieniemy said that Sam being benched was for his own good, right? Like for the betterment of his growth and development, and it was a chance for him to step back, see how it's done, take a breath, because I did feel like Sam was pressing in that game, and the whole excuse that Ronald gave, this wasn't a game where he was getting slaughtered. We've seen games earlier in the season where you could have made the case, hey, we needed to protect him from himself. We needed to get him out of there, right? This wasn't one of those games. So I wasn't buying that excuse, and I told you guys as much. Now, if you would have said, hey, he was struggling, he wasn't seeing the field well, and we wanted him to take a step back, let a veteran get in there and show him, that hang in there. You got this, right? Just give him a chance to hit the reset button. I would have been a lot more comfortable with that explanation than the one that they gave. But that's nor here nor there. We're arguing over potato at this point. They benched him. That's the biggest thing, right? So Bieniemy pretty much said, look, we did it to give the kid a chance to breathe, to hit the reset button, to kind of see how a veteran handles these situations. Remember, he's still young, he's still learning, but he's got to get back on that horse. Like, this was not a demotion. This was not to be derogatory or negative. This was made to be a positive. Now, you get back on that horse, you get back in there, and let's see what you got. And then to take it a step further, Bieniemy was asked how a second year in this offense would benefit Sam. And he said, look, that would do wonders for him. And of course, Eric Bieniemy is politicking for himself, right? At this point, like, hey, give me another shot. Give me another year with the young fella. Let me show you that this offense can work. The more comfortable he is, and he's not wrong about having more time on task in the same offense. That's one of the issues with, if you roll with Sam again next year, is he'll be learning another offense. We'll be talking about some of the same things again. I think the next guy, if it's Ben Johnson, will do a better job of alleviating some of the ills of learning a new offense by being more balanced. He won't be all on Sam's shoulders. He won't have to throw the football, 44 times every week. he'll be able to turn around and hand the football off, and he'll be throwing to more open receivers because of that balance. That play action fake will allow receivers to be open in the middle of the football field, giving him clear windows to throw into. And I think he'll be in a better pocket, because when you're running the football effectively, and this, say what you want about this offense, we've actually run the football very solidly this year. This isn't like Scott Turner where we struggled to run the football. We've run the football with some success this year. It just hasn't been enough, right? So you run the football effectively. Teams can't pin their ears back. They can't be as aggressive. The play action fake holds them a bit, and it gives you an opportunity to get chunk plays, but also stretch the field vertically, but also give your quarterback some easier windows to throw the football into. So anyway, I said all that to say this. Eric Bieniemy is not getting another year with Sam Howell. Sam Howell may not even get another year at this point, but they're definitely not getting another year together. That's for certain. But that didn't stop Eric Bieniemy from making the case for another year as the play caller and what that could do for Sam Howell's growth and development, being in the same offense 2 years in a row. That I can't debate. What I can debate is I just don't know if Eric Bieniemy is going to get that much better as a play caller. I think he is who he is as a play caller, and that's the part that I don't have any patience for. That's run thin and it's run out at this point. So I digress. Now let's go behind enemy lines and take a look at the Jets real quick. Again, there's not a lot that needs to be said here. I already told you, I don't think Zach Wilson's going to play. I think that makes all the difference in the world for Washington. It gives them an opportunity. The Commanders are 3-point underdogs in this game, rightfully so. The Jets are at home. That's why they're 3-point favorites. If Washington was home, this probably would be an even money game, or Jets would be a 1-point favorite or something like that. But the Jets being at home gives them the 3-point advantage, and that's probably where it should be. Honestly, Washington's defense hasn't stopped anybody this season, and that included when Montez Sweat and Chase Young were here. Now that they're not here, they're incapable of getting to the other team's quarterback. And so no matter who's there for the Jets, I don't see Washington getting to them and flustering them. However, if they could, that would be a huge plus, because whomever's at quarterback, and it probably will be Trevor Siemian, any pressure is going to rattle that quarterback, and he already stinks as is. But if you give any NFL quarterback time, as we've seen this season, Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, and Tommy DeVito have all scorched us as if they were top-notch quarterbacks because they were given time to throw the football. And so if you give Trevor Siemian time, he's an NFL quarterback for a reason. He's not a very good one, but he's a quarterback that made it this far for a reason. And I don't see us getting pressure, so that's a problem for me, right? And they've got the receivers, specifically Garrett Wilson, to expose a secondary that has been trash pretty much all season long, but it seems to be getting progressively worse each and every single week with bigger blown plays week after week after week. That said, or MAs as they're called, every single week. With that said, could this be the week that the defense does just enough and the offense gets their act together against a Jets defense that has been elite, but even they're starting to feel the wear and tear of a long season that is a lost one. I mean, they gave up 30 points to the Dolphins last week without Tyreek Hill. Not that offense is any less dynamic, still having Jalen Waddle, but it's not as dynamic without Tyreek Hill, and they still gave up 30 points last week. So this is a Jets defense that I think is starting to feel the effects of a long season that had expectations, that hasn't gone the way that they would like it to. And so I think there will be some opportunities. Again, they're still good, and they've done a really good job of taking advantage of quarterbacks who have not played well this season. They've done a good job of taking advantage of good quarterbacks, but they played those good quarterbacks when they still thought they had a chance to make something of their season. They're a little bit different right now, but again, the key will be, can we not turn the ball over offensively? Can we score points? Because this Jets offense isn't going to score a ton. If we can avoid turnovers which is something this offense hasn't been able to do for the last month or so. And we can score points. You would love it to be touchdowns. You're going to have a chance to win this game. But even if you kick field goals, just score every opportunity that you have a chance. Every opportunity you get in the scoring range, whether it's a field goal or touch, score. That's going to apply pressure to the Jets and put them in a tough situation to try to keep pace. I don't expect a high-scoring affair, but again, with this defense, nothing is out of bounds, right? So we'll see what happens. It's going to be, I think, a close, low-scoring affair with the team that makes the least amount. This is literally one of those, the team that makes the least amount of mistakes is going to win the football game type of games. We'll see who that is, whether it's Washington or the Jets. And honestly, this might be Washington's last opportunity to win a game. So they don't win this one, they'll probably finish the season 4-13. They win this game, they'll probably finish the season 5-12. And again, the difference between the number 2 pick overall or the number 7, 8, or 9 pick is winning this game or losing this game. So again, we will see. But that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Commanders Nightly News. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. I'll be live after Thursday Night Football tonight, and then tomorrow I'll have your predictions for the game. I've already told you what I think, but I haven't given you a score or how we will reach that outcome, so we'll be doing that tomorrow. But until then, you guys have a good one. God bless. Take care.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's